even though, if you go back to Romans 2, he says, Jews that have the law, those who have the law, don't do what the law requires, or think this about this person or whatever, but I wrestle with this. And so we are like this man and in this place where we're like, man, like I don't know. Everything changes. That's why the first phrase in this, it says, but now, the righteousness of God. All of Romans, you could say, is about the righteousness of God, contrasted with the righteousness, the self-righteousness of man. There is a huge difference. His ways are not our ways. As high as the heavens are from the earth are his ways than our ways. That's why when Jesus was here and he spoke that Sermon on the Mount, people were wrecked because it got to the heart of the law and they realized all of us are guilty. If I've had lustful thoughts, if I've had hateful thoughts, then in the Old Testament. You read through the Old Testament through this lens, okay? And you look at it. God is extremely patient. The Old Testament is to set up Jesus coming. So that in Galatians 4:4, we're told that at the right time, Jesus came into this world. At God's perfect time, Jesus came into this world to redeem mankind. And you had all of the Old Testament points to that. I look at the Old Testament, there's a lot of what you call chiasms in the Old Testament, which is where it's a literary device meant to point to the time of the judges, and it says that who wanted to kill him, King Jesus is eventually going to reign. King Jesus is eventually going to reign on this earth forever. But he doesn't come first on this earth forever. But he doesn't come first as a mighty king to rule the world broken. Jesus just spoke truth and he loved people broken. Jesus just spoke truth and he loved people and he picked up the broken and the poor and those who are oppressed, and he said, don't stone the woman who has adultery, because you know what? Each one of you and the prophets, that's the Old Testament, bear witness to the gospel. It shows that we need Jesus. It is our mirror. The law is frustrated with it, But then you go into, like right now especially, you go into Indiana, frustrated with it, But then you go into, like right now, especially, you go into Indiana, it gets worse. You go into Michigan, it gets even worse. You go into Michigan, it even gets even worse, which I like to say that. Michigan roads are bad. But roads are nice. Ohio roads are even better, David, off of his sores because he had leprosy, and the rich man who would walk over him, and justified this because Lazarus, he thinks, had it coming to him. With some of the quotes in past, back even to the Old Testament and the Exodus from Egypt, plague being the Passover, which is the Passover